every country has a different government. It's geopolitical, depending on that history. Some are constitutional, some are autocratic, some are communist, right? But they all represent states that have a defined border and are co-equal. Okay. You guys following me? You guys good? Okay. Hawaii was the only non-European power in the family of nations from 1843 to 1899. Because 1899 is when Japan and all of them were coming in. That's pretty amazing. Yeah. I didn't learn that at Kamehameha. And I'm sure you guys didn't learn it at any other place. Since 1852, the Hawaiian Kingdom was a recognized neutral state, along with Belgium, Luxembourg, and Switzerland. Yeah, it's in the treaties. The Danish treaty, the Spanish treaty, the German treaty. They recognized the Hawaiian Kingdom as a neutral state because neutrality is actually part of international relations. Because war, in international law back then, was legal. And when you have a neutral territory, and you are fighting outside of that neutral territory, if you make it to the neutral territory, if you disarm, you can enter and refurbish, recoup. And then leave that neutral territory, rearm, and go back fighting. Did you know that has a very similar, analogous look like Hawaii in ancient days? Because did you know under Hawaiian culture, during the time of Kamehameha, war was part of our culture. Yeah, Pukailimoku, right? War. And what did we have? We had something similar to neutral territory. City of Refuge. Yeah. So when Hawaii entered this international arena, they were kind of familiar with some of the concepts, but different terminology. Since 1859, natives throughout the islands had universal health care at Queen's Hospital and maternity care at Kapi'olani at no charge. Did you guys know that? I didn't know that. I heard about it. Actually at no charge, not free, at no charge. Because this was management of native tenant rights. Yeah? So it's part of the unique Hawaiian law that you can only find here. And by 1864, the separation of powers doctrine was fully enshrined in the Hawaiian Constitution. Separation of powers. So Queen Liliuokalani was a chief executive. She did not represent all of Hawaii. The chief executive, no different than the President of the United States. And literacy was nearly universal. Wow, that's pretty heavy. Everybody could read and write. That's what assisted the transition to understand government reform. How's this one? This guy's name is Dr. Sun Yat-sen. He is the father of modern China. Did you know he went to school in Honolulu? But he's a Maui boy. Yeah. You know his brother? Chinese, he used to work for Ulupalukua Ranch. Brought his younger brother to Hawaii to get educated. See, back then, the monarchy was running China. Very oppressive. Yeah. So he sent for his brother to come to Honolulu to get educated. He attended Iolani College and Oahu College, also known as Punoho. And then what he learned here, he learned about what it is to be in a civilized entity. And he got ideas to take back to China and start the revolution. In 1910, he was interviewed by a reporter from the Honolulu magazine, which was established back in the 1880s. In 1910, Dr. Sun Yat-sen told the reporter, "This is my Hawaii. Here I was brought up and educated, and it was here that I came to know what modern civilized governments are like and what they mean." Wow. That's pretty heavy. Dr. Sun Yat-sen. Did you know that that is a recognition of what Hawaii was back then? How come I didn't know that? The way it's portrayed, the missionary came, took over, and we fell over and fell asleep because we're lazy. Yeah, that's the narrative. That's the false narrative in order to hide and conceal the occupation. So we're going to see, why is it that we didn't know this kind of stuff? So not only were there countries like Great Britain, France, and the United States very confident that the Hawaiian Kingdom had a civilized system of rule of law, but this is coming from a private person who experienced it himself. Now some people I've heard, they say, oh, 1910, Dr. Sun Yat-sen says this because he's talking about the territory of Hawaii, America. He learned democracy in America. Okay, if you take 1879 to 1883, and you apply those dates to America, you know what you're gonna find? The Chinese Exclusion Act. Yeah. Oh, that wasn't good. If you're Chinese, you're not treated right. Did you know Chinatowns throughout America are actually areas of segregation? Because Chinese would only be allowed to live in a particular place, which came to be known as Chinatowns. Yeah, that's where it came from. So he definitely would not have said, if he was in California between 1879 and 1883, that this is where I learned modern civilized governments are. No, because it would have been on the receiving end of racism. Did you know in the Hawaiian Kingdom there was no Chinatown? But we have a Chinatown in Honolulu. Did you know that Chinatown was created after America took over? See, now they created a little segregational place. So, again, here, compare and contrast, Joe. That's the point here, compare and contrast. So here are some other countries that recognize Hawaii's civilized system, rule of law, natives running things. 90% of the nationals are natives. 90% of the attorneys in the kingdom are natives. They say they're good orators. Yeah, that's true. Native Hawaiians can tell good stories. Austria-Hungary have a consulate in the city of Vienna. Now, before I move on to this, I need to clarify, there's a difference between what is an embassy and what is a consulate. An embassy represents a government in the capital of the receiving state, right? So you only find embassies within countries' capitals because they represent the government, right? Consulates represent the government, but more so, they represent the citizenry. So wherever you see consulates, there is activity there of nationals of that particular country, whether residing there or doing business there. So here we have a Hawaiian consulate in Vienna, in Austria. And you don't just create a consulate for the sake of creating it and it's there. Because you're wasting money. It's called, you have a budget. Yeah. If they're not functioning, they're not needed, move it. So Austria-Hungary, Belgium. You had Hawaiian consulates in Antwerp, again, Leeds and Bergs, Brooks. Bremen. Denmark, consulate in Copenhagen. France, Hawaii had an embassy in Paris. So diplomatic posts. And then consulates in these cities. Germany, consulates in Frankfurt. Great Britain, Hawaiian embassy in London. Hawaiian consulates in all these cities. That's pretty impressive. That means there was a buzz going on between the Hawaiian nationals, Hawaiian subjects, and British subjects. Commercial trade, residency, whatever it was. And also consulates in the cities of the British colonies, such as Canada, Australia, New Zealand. Hamburg, Italy. When I was in Italy for my trip last week, they were tripping out on this. Indigenous people do not have a treaty like this with Italy. This means this is a co-equal to Italy, Hawaii. So, short story about this. This is pretty cool. 3 years ago, there was a doctoral student that came to Hawaii. She used to work for the United Nations, and she was part of the Permanent Forum of Indigenous Rights, working with the Permanent Forum of Indigenous Rights. She befriended Mililani Trask. She was a representative on the Permanent Forum of Indigenous Rights. And Mililani was explaining to her about Hawaii's colonization, Hawaiians are indigenous, blah, blah, blah. So, when the doctoral program came up, she came to Hawaii 3 years ago to do her research, begin her research on Native Hawaiians as an indigenous population. Okay. So she met up with a professor named Dr. Lynette Cruz from Hawaii Pacific University, and Dr. Cruz said, you know, I think you need to talk to Dr. Sai because information has come out that kind of is shifting the paradigm. And especially for doctoral dissertations, you want to make sure you have the appropriate theoretical framework. So we set up a meeting, we spoke 3 years ago. First thing I did was, I showed her a copy of the treaty. I didn't say she was wrong. That's disrespectful. I just showed her a treaty. And then I showed her where all the consulates were. Rome, Genoa, Naples, Venice, Palermo, and Turin. And she's actually from Turin. In Italian, it's Torino. She's like, wow. And that is when she took the red pill. Everything went upside down. And then she told me later that she went home, because I saw her when I was up there this past couple of weeks. So she told me what happened when she got home. She said it took a year for her to decompress. A whole year.
From that red pill.
Because this is a doctoral dissertation. It's not just you writing a paper. So what she did was she said, I want to find out and see where the Italian treaty is from the Italian side. I gave her the Hawaiian version from the Hawaiian archives. She wanted to see the Italian side. So she's in Torino. And Torino used to be the capital of Italy until after World War II, then it moved to Rome. Okay? And Italy used to be a kingdom until the monarch sided with the wrong guy called Mussolini, and that ended up terminating the monarchy after World War II. And then the capitals moved to Rome, right? But in Torino, you have what is called the Royal Library. She's never been there, even though she's from Torino. And she said that the treaty might be there. So she went in. It's the story she's telling them. This is so cool. So she went in, tried to find the treaty. And she said when you walk in, on the left side are all the treaties that have been canceled or superseded with countries. And on the right side are all the active treaties that exist today. So she found the Hawaiian-Italian treaty on the side that was canceled. So she tells the librarian, this is a mistake. It's supposed to be on the other side because Hawaii's occupied. And the treaty still exists, it wasn't canceled. Now in Italy, they respect academics. See, unlike in Hawaii, people think academics just have an opinion. But over there, they respect them because it's research. So she told, the librarian conveyed to her, says, why don't you write a letter to the directorate, the government official who runs the library, and explain why this is a mistake and provide evidence. So she did, she wrote a letter. She said 4 months later, 4 months, she got a letter back from the directorate thanking her for the information and that they had moved the treaty to the other side. Wow, that's Italian. Had nothing to do with me. I just merely shifted the paradigm. And she started to ask the right questions. See, research is about asking the right questions. That's the key, asking the right questions. She asked the right questions. And you know when you answer one question, guess what, you got about 5 more to answer. Then you answer the 5, guess what, you got 10 more. But that's called education. That's called research. That's how it works. But that's pretty cool, you know? I went, wow. And then she took me to the Royal Library and I saw it. So I got pictures of it. Wow, awesome. See, now the Italians are looking at Hawaii through the treaty. Not natives as indigenous. They're going, whoa, they're occupied. You know?
Dr. Seid, the same thing in Budapest in Hungary. I'm Hungarian, so
There you go.
it's the same thing. It's been moved over.
And the Hungarian treaty, yeah, exactly. It's still there. Switzerland actually acknowledged the treaty wasn't canceled as well. The Swiss court said it was never canceled because it wasn't. You know, so everybody's starting to wake up to this reality. It's not just here. We're connected internationally. Here we got Japan, okay? Embassy in Tokyo and consulates. Oh, by the way, here's the story of Japan. Right now, history books say that the first country to recognize Japan's independence, now you know what independence means, right? The first country to recognize Japan's independence was Great Britain in 1894. Guess what? No. When I presented at the University of Cambridge in England, I presented this part of Hawaii's history. Did you know that when King Kalakaua traveled to Japan in 1881, he met with the Meiji Emperor? And the Meiji Emperor asked him, would you be the first power to recognize Japan's independence and set the stage for the rest of the powers to follow? That kind of is an indication that the Emperor is recognizing how high King Kalakaua is.
Yeah.
That's impressive. So Kalakaua, he couldn't follow up because he wanted to, but because he ran into the bayonet problem in 1887. But you know who followed up? His sister, Lili Mokalani, January 1893. Minister Irwin, the ambassador for Hawaii in Tokyo, notified the Japanese government that Hawaii is recognizing Japan's full independence and is rescinding consular jurisdiction, which means Hawaiian subjects are now subject to Japanese law. Great Britain didn't do it until 1 year later. So when I presented in Cambridge, they're like, why? It just changes everything. Because they all thought that Hawaii was like the other non-European powers that wasn't recognized as independent. When in fact, Hawaii was recognized as independent. And Hawaii, did you know, had an unequal treaty with Japan. So any Hawaiian subject in trouble in Japan before 1893 could only be prosecuted under Hawaiian Kingdom law by the Hawaiian consulate. Just like America, just like Russia. Wow. Kind of trivial. But that's Hawaii's history. The Netherlands had an embassy in Amsterdam, and consulates. Portugal also had a consulate in Madeira. Some business activity was going on in Madeira. Anybody know what's going on between Hawaii and Portugal in Madeira? Portuguese laborers were coming in from either Madeira or Azores. So you have a consulate there, making sure the contracts are right. Now Portugal would not send their people to Hawaii to be slaves. And contract laborers are actually, they had it really good, had health insurance and everything. And a lot of people don't talk about that, but that's all in Hawaiian law. Russia, had a treaty with Russia. Samoa, Spain, Switzerland, Sweden and Norway, and the United States. Embassy in Washington, D.C., Hawaiian consulates in those cities. By 1893, Hawaii had over 90 embassies and consulates all over the world. Now, doesn't that paint a very different picture of Hawaii? Doesn't it get you to ask, what else? Yeah. What else is here that I didn't know? So, Hawaii, an independent state, 1843, exercised by a government. Now, in international law, you gotta separate state from government. Yeah, they're not synonymous. Governments exercise the authority of the state, they're not the state. The reason is, governments can be overthrown without overthrowing the state. Iraq 2003, the Iraqi government was overthrown militarily. That did not mean Iraq ceased to exist. It was a state. What you call that situation? Occupation. That's international humanitarian law, not human rights law, which is peacetime. So, what happened in 1893? Something really simple. How can so few people take over a country like that? With consulates all over, a constitutional system. Well, in political science, we call it regime change. You don't change the whole government, you change the executive office. Replace the executive with insurgents and force everybody to sign oaths of allegiance to that insurgency. Yeah, it's called hijacking. So they just hijacked this Hawaiian plane that flies in the sky with British Airways, American Airlines. All it did was take over the pilot. Queen Lili'u Kalani and her 4 cabinet ministers replaced them with Sanford Dole, Executive Council, Advisory Council. Marines landed, protect them from the police force from arresting them for treason, and then released sleeping gas into the cabin. And everybody signed oaths of allegiance. And if you don't sign an oath of allegiance, you get put in prison, you get discriminated, you don't have a job. Well, the Royal Hawaiian Band, members of the Royal Hawaiian Band refused to sign the oath of allegiance. Here's the oath of allegiance. They refused to sign it. Because these insurgents did not want to become a country, to run a country. They wanted to give Hawaii to the United States by signing a treaty transferring Hawaii. That's what the plan was in 1893. And these members said no. Guess what? They all got fired. No job. How do you raise your family? But it made them defiant. Ku'e. Yeah? And they went to Mrs. Prendergast to have her compose a song of their defiance. And that song is what we know today as Kaulananapua, which is the original name of the song called Mele Alohaina, the Patriot song. Alohaina is Patriot, the Patriot song. Now, the lyrics are still the same today, even the melody, yeah, still today. But because a lot of us don't speak Hawaiian, we don't get what they're saying. But they're playing this song in Safeway. Yeah, they play them on KPOA. People start tapping. Yeah, it's a pretty good song. You want to hear the lyrics? Cyrus Green actually sang it in both English and Hawaiian. So here it is.
famous are the children of Hawaii. Ever loyal to the land. When the uncaring messenger comes, with his greedy document of extortion. From the Big Island, Keawe answers. Help also comes from Pi'ilani. Lalo's Hawaii lends support. And so do the sands of Kaku-Kapa. No one will write his name on the paper of the enemy. With its sin of annexation and the sale of native civil rights. We do not value the government's sums of money. We are satisfied with our stones, the astonishing food of the land. We back Liliulani, who has won the rights of the land. And now we tell the story again of the people who love their land. We will not rest until we have our lands.
How's those lyrics, though? And that song is so relevant today. Really, nothing has changed but time. Yeah? But our memory. We didn't know any of this. But it kind of presents a very different side to Hawaii's history of some coherence. Yeah? And it's not race-based. It's not cultural-based. It's a country that has been seized illegally by the United States. So there were two attempts to acquire Hawaii by treaty. The first was in 1893, negotiated between the insurgents and Benjamin Harrison. So the America is going to try to get Hawaii by a treaty because they know they can't pass a law. They're going to try it. So they manufactured this idea that Hawaii, there was a popular revolution, that the Queen was a tyrant, abusive power. Wait a minute, Hawaii was a constitutional system. Did all these countries that had treaties with Hawaii think Hawaii was abusive? It was all manufactured, it was a lie. All manufactured by Minister Stevens, the ambassador. Then they went off and signed the treaty. And then they're going to start propaganda, a campaign throughout the United States. Did you know they began to portray natives as inept, stupid, dumb? Yeah. They began to portray Queen Liliuokalani, as a monkey with a bone in her hair. Bad. But that's what was going on back then. Trying to justify that these insurgents who were criminals, and I'm giving them, I don't want to call them insurgents, because they never carried weapons. They had the Marines land to protect them. To me, I would have more respect, because I'm former military. You declare your insurgency, you pull out a weapon, you get shot dead, hey, then I know you was an insurgent, but at least I know you was. And not you pay for guys to protect you, because you're afraid. In fact, James Blunt, who was assigned to investigate Hawaii, he actually has a few digs that he gives to Sanford Dole and Lauren Thurston in his reports to the Secretary of State, Walter Gresham. He said, these are not real insurgents. See, James Blunt was an insurgent. He actually was a colonel in a Confederate army during the Civil War. He survived. So he knows what it takes to believe in something. And I would see him, just these little digs, and I kind of liked it. I was like, wow, right on. But the way we think of Sanford Dole, oh, he's a pillar of society, he's a criminal. Not his family, right? Him. And the United States President said these are insurgents, and that they told the Queen, we will reinstate you as long as you grant amnesty to these insurgents, because without a pardon, they're going to get convicted by a jury and executed. So that kind of gives you an idea who these guys are. They're insurgents. Well, not even insurgents. They're just, I like to say they're all high on sugar. That was the batu at that time. President Cleveland, Harrison's successor, withdrew the treaty from the Senate, which was signed and submitted to the Senate, and instead entered into a treaty with the Queen to reinstate her, called an executive agreement. President Cleveland did not carry out the Treaty of Restoration because of political pressure in the Congress. Because you know what America really wanted? It was nothing to do with sugar. It was all about getting Pearl Harbor. It was all military. No, it was. It is. You know, it was never about sugar. Sugar was the means by which to use to get Hawaii as a military outpost. The second attempt occurred under President McKinley, Cleveland's successor, when the treaty was signed in 1897. Queen Lili'uokalani is in Washington, D.C. She files a diplomatic protest. In particular, she says, I declare such a treaty to be an act of wrong toward the native and part native people of Hawaii, an invasion of the rights of the ruling chiefs, in violation of international rights, both toward my people and toward friendly nations with whom they have made treaties. Remember all those treaties? The perpetuation of the fraud whereby the constitutional government was overthrown, and finally an act of gross injustice to me. President McKinley is still set on submitting that treaty for approval by the Senate because they want Pearl Harbor. The Undersecretary of the Navy is Theodore Roosevelt at that time. He's driving it, along with Senator Henry Cabot Lodge, President of the Senate, and Captain Alfred Mahan from U.S. Naval War College. Well, here's a petition that now we know a lot about, but before we didn't know. So Professor Noinoy Silva, political scientist from UH Manoa. This was part of her doctoral dissertation, her research, opposition to the treaty. And the signature petition of 21,000 signatures, petition against annexation, and that he killed the treaty. Well, it didn't kill the treaty because it was a petition. Actually, the people that was sent with the treaty, James Kauli, David Kaori-Lei, Richardson, they actually went to all the senators who verbally said they're going to ratify the treaty. They went directly to them, pounded the pavement, and got them to withdraw, to not approve. So they effectively killed the treaty, and that's pretty heavy. That shows they are politically astute of how the system works, and they killed it. They didn't have the power, but they knew the system and worked it. They killed the treaty. But what they couldn't stop was the breakout of the Spanish-American War, 1 month after the treaty's dead. April 1898, America has to fight the Spanish, not just in the Caribbean, Puerto Rico and Cuba, but also in the Pacific, Guam and the Philippines. On May 1st, U.S. occupies the Spanish colonies of Philippines and Guam, and now they're engaged in a battle on land. They need reinforcements. They need Hawaii. That is when, August 12, 1898, Hawaii is occupied during the Spanish-American War. That's why they passed a joint resolution, a law, to seize another country during war. Did you know this is very similar to what Germany did to Luxembourg in 1914? Luxembourg was a neutral state, like Hawaii is a neutral state. Luxembourg was invaded and occupied by Germany to launch attacks into France. That was a direct violation of Luxembourg neutrality. That's exactly what we have here. You see what happens when you bring in the football rules? Starts to make sense. But you also have to know that Hawaii is neutral. Hawaii was a state, independent. After the war, the United States remained and maintained its insurgency under the title of Territory of Hawaii. Now Sanford Dole, the insurgent, is now governor. And now it's not good to be in Hawaii because they can't change the minds of the people. Because they're adults. It's like me imagine Russia came and took us over. Do you think I'll be successful in getting you to believe that we're Russian? No. But I can go after your kids. I'm going to brainwash them. I'm going to control them. But let's take a look at what they thought back then. Yeah? How did they think? Well, here's a Maui News. What's that? Maui News from Maui. Yeah. October 20th, 1900. You see this guy, G.B. Robertson? He's the editor. He's a criminal. He's an insurgent who was not granted a pardon. See, notice I'm not getting personal, right? I'm just citing what the president said they were. And the Queen didn't grant a pardon because she wasn't reinstated, so they're still criminals. Did you know a lot of the newspapers were propaganda? Pacific Commercial Advertiser, Maui News, propaganda. Right? So they're going to focus on this guy, Thomas Clark. Right here, Thomas Clark. So this editor, Robertson, is going to talk about this guy, Thomas Clark. So it says here, Thomas Clark, a candidate for territorial senator from Maui, holds that it was an unconstitutional proceeding on the part of the United States to annex the islands without a treaty. Hey, he knows there was no treaty. I didn't know anything about a treaty, let alone a joint resolution. I just was told Americans came, missionaries stole everything, and now we got Hawaiian homes. That's it. A real quick history. Without a treaty. And that, as a matter of fact, the islands are not annexed, according to Thomas Clark. And it cannot be. And that if the Democrats come into power, they will show the thing up in its true light and demonstrate that the islands are de facto independent at the present time. Clearly, Thomas Clark knows what independent means, meaning its own laws, not American laws. And then here's a response by G.B. Robertson. Thomas, necessity knows no law. Now this guy's going to talk like he's from the U.S. State Department. Keep in mind, the guy's from Wailuku, Maui, okay? Thomas, necessity knows no law, and it was absolutely necessary to annex the islands at the time it was done. You notice annex means to grab, right? They're not talking cession. And further, Thomas, if it becomes necessary to annex Cuba, it will be done quicker than a wink. Gee, brother. Wailuku. I'm talking on behalf of the State Department. It is but fair to give you credit for being honest in your views, Thomas, but you don't quite understand the American people just yet, hence you're very misleading. This is the beginning of Fox News. The building of the bubble. And guess what? The bubble just popped. Because now we're talking about it. But clearly, what can we glean from this article? Obviously, Thomas knew there was no treaty. So he knew the importance of a treaty. And also, Thomas, he didn't understand the American people, which implies he's not American. Thomas Clark. Who's this guy, Thomas Clark? Remember that signature petition against annexation? This is in Wailuku. There's Thomas Clark right there, age 42. That's why he knows there was no treaty. It killed it. And it says right there, Hawaiian next to it. Hawaiian is a nationality. We use it wrong today. Hawaiian citizenship, short for the word Hawaiian subject. Natives or Aboriginal, okay, that's Kanaka Maoli, pure or part. But you can be a Hawaiian and be Haole. Guess what? Thomas Clark was Haole, but he was Hawaiian. Remember, Hawaii, it's a nationality issue. It's not an ethnic issue. It's not indigenous. That keeps us going over here. That's not how it was. And he's 42 years old, and he stood out. And did you know anybody who signed this also made themselves a target? Yeah. Oh, yeah. And did you know many didn't want to sign it because they felt their businesses would be affected. So for that man to sign that, that's a patriot right there. Yeah?
Brave.
Very brave. So why is it that we don't know? Remember, I want to target the children. Samuel Damon, insurgent, and I'm giving him some credence here. He's not an insurgent, he's a coward, but I'll just put there insurgent. He actually on the record said this in the so-called Republic of Hawaii cabinet minutes. If we're ever to have peace and annexation, the first thing to do is to obliterate the past. Got to obliterate the past. Who's this guy, Samuel Damon? A trustee of Kamehameha schools. All the trustees at this time were insurgents. William O. Smith, Charles Reed Bishop, insurgents. Commitment schools will become the flagship of brainwashing. No, I'm serious. I'm not making an argument here. The records show it.
Youth camps.
The record shows it. And I'm a commitment grad. Guess what? I didn't know any of this. I guess I'm a victim of brainwashing. Now, denationalization is the process by which to obliterate the national consciousness of a state, any memory. You can only do that to children. You cannot do it to adults. Pol Pot tried to do that. Yeah, the killing fields. That didn't work. He just basically wiped out the intelligentsia. Go after the children. So you cannot change Thomas Clark's mind from Maui. He knows Hawaii's occupied. Hawaii's still independent. But his children, his child. In 1906, here's this pamphlet, Program for Patriotic Exercises in the Public Schools. It was published by the Department of Public Instruction. In there, the theme of the program is to brainwash the children into believing they're American and to speak English. Wow. That's part of a doctoral research rating, and actually a doctoral student uncovered that. And I read it. All you have is American presidents, American history, Star Spangled Banner, Yankee Doodle Dandy. No, I'm serious, it's all in there. And if you speak Hawaiian, which is a national language, not the native language, yeah? Thomas Clark spoke Hawaiian. He wasn't trying to be native. He's in a country called the Hawaiian Kingdom. They speak Hawaiian. It's like speaking French in France. Speaking Portuguese in Portugal. You don't have to be from Portugal to speak Portuguese. That's the country. They made a policy, if the children speak Hawaiian, they get beaten. And our kupuna tell us those stories. So this is my grandparents' generation. All you're learning is red, white, and blue, right? And how to speak English. So from grades 1 through 8th grade is the brainwashing. And if you're not a good American, you can't go to high school. That's why a lot of our kupuna, like my papa, started working after 8th grade. Yeah, no, he couldn't go to Honolulu High School, which changed the name to President William McKinley High School. Then you got Theodore Roosevelt High School, English Standard. Yeah? Thomas Jefferson Elementary. You see they're making all these names. It's all part of the brainwashing. In 1907, there was a reporter from New York, from the Honolulu Weekly from the Harper's Weekly magazine, came to Hawaii to do a story on this. Actually wrote a story on this brainwashing. He visited Kaori-Lei and Ka'ahumanu Public School, as well as Honolulu High School, before the name was changed to McKinley High School. Okay. And we use these articles in our classes that we teach at UH. And he came here and he visited Kaori-Lei Public School with 640 school children from grade 1 to 8. This is my tutu's generation. And at the command of the principal, they stand at attention and start marching. And the reporter is commenting how much of the precision is. It's like he's never seen this. And these are children marching. And then they line up in front of the flag, and at the command of the principal, they salute. Like that. Looks familiar? They salute. And they yell in unison a particular thing, a statement. Here's the picture from the article. And it says here under it, it says, they yell in unison, we give our heads and our hearts to God and our country. One language, one flag. Whoa. This scene shows the salute to the American flag, which flies in the grounds of the Kaori-Lei Public School, which has many Japanese. The drill is constantly held as a means of inculcating patriotism in the hearts of the children. That word inculcate, by definition, is brainwashing through repetition. That's what that means. Pretty bold even to use those words, yeah? Not just, we're educating the children to be good Americans. No, inculcate. And if they start speaking Hawaiian, beat them. So now let's say I'm Thomas Clark. The language of the country is Hawaiian. If I speak to my daughter or my son in Hawaiian, he's going to naturally speak Hawaiian. He's going to slip in school and he gets beaten. Guess what the parents got to do? They got to make some decisions. It's called survival. So by the time, so this is brainwashing. By the time I got to my parents, my dad was born in 1939. By the time I got to him, it's already institutionalized. By the time I got to me at community schools, I didn't know anything. Nothing. Nothing at all. That's called denationalization. Obliterate the national memory of a country. That's what Germans were doing. Even Italians. Italianization, Germanization. So within 2 generations, the national consciousness of the Hawaiian Kingdom was obliterated and replaced through Americanization. It interfered with the methods of education, compelled education in the English language, banned the use of Hawaiian in the schools, imposed conscription or drafting for wars upon Hawaiian nationals, imposed American administrative and judicial systems, imposed American financial and economic administration. In its totality, this is called genocide, according to Professor Lincoln. That's the definition. Mind-blowing, huh? Wow. The Matrix. Here's the indictment, 1945, Nuremberg. United States, Great Britain, French and the Russians versus Hermann Goering, Rudolf Hess. These are Nazis. Count 3, war crimes, Germanization of occupied territories. In certain occupied territories, purportedly annexed to Germany, the defendants methodically and pursuant to plan endeavored to assimilate those territories politically, culturally, socially, and economically into the German Reich. The defendants endeavored to obliterate the former national character of these territories. In pursuance of these plans and endeavors, the defendants forcibly deported inhabitants who were predominantly non-German and introduced thousands of German colonists. This plan included economic domination, physical conquest, installation of puppet governments, purported de jure or lawful annexation, and enforced conscription or drafting into the German armed forces. This was carried out in most of the occupied countries, including Norway, France, Luxembourg, Soviet Union, Denmark, Belgium, and Holland. Wow. The similarities are mind-blowing. Yeah? Basically, what they tried to do in 4 years, here you have what happened in Hawaii in 1906, unfettered. Nobody stopped it. And we are the evidence of that. The fact that we don't know this, you're the evidence of the crime. Yeah. We've all been affected by denationalization. So, how are you guys doing so far? All right? All right. Kind of heavy, huh? Yeah. Good. How's that history professor over there? And you know what? I'm not making up any of this. It's hard information. Yeah? But you need the theoretical framework to understand it. Because you naturally will get into the issue of, well, what do you do? What now? Yeah? I remember my tutu once told me, when I started getting into this and talking like this back in the mid-90s, just because I'm uncovering information, I'm like, wow. You know, I'm like, Tutu, look. She says, you know, Keanu, you know what your problem is? She said, I had a problem. She said, when I grew up, the least you know, the better you off. Now that is a window into that time. It's not now. I'm a retired captain. I look at things straight. I call it, right? I'm not afraid. The big 5. I'm not afraid about finding myself in the cane fields. But that's how it was back then. And we got to keep that in mind. But my tutu had to go through that in order for me to be here to talk like this. She endured a lot just to survive. And I think we owe that to our kupuna, you know. When they say they don't speak the language, now here's the reason. That's the reason. It's not because they chose, it was because they had to make a difference for the children, right? But now here we are. So one thing that we cannot do, and I'm not a proponent of getting angry. I'm a proponent of getting aware and get educated. Now with education will come remedy. When I was in the Army, the way we looked at the future and the past, the practical value of history is that it's a film of the past, run through the projector of today onto the screen of tomorrow. That film never changes, but your projector has to get updated to process the film. Once you process the film, now you see something you didn't see before, and now you're going to find what is your kuleana. The Hawaiian word for future is kawamahope. Literally the time of the past. So when you tell a Hawaiian, look to the future, they turn to the past. In the past, which begins from a second ago to 100 to 200 years ago, you will capitalize on successes and learn from mistakes. That's the mo'olelo. Once you understand and you capitalize and you learn, now you have ike, now you have foresight. Now you see something you didn't see. All of a sudden, whoa. But within that vision, now you got to figure out what is your kuleana. What is your responsibility? My kuleana was to address this issue head on. I was not on a popularity contest because I know I want to say things that people don't like. And I got a thick skin. I was in the Army. No problem. You provide me intel, I change. You don't provide me intel, I move on. Make sense? So here I am in 1994, retired, in the wrong army. Not going to contribute to another possible death because I went to war. But if I do, I'll have to be a mercenary. What am I going to do? And imagine, I woke up in this Hawaiian Airlines that have been painted red, white, and blue. Yeah. And I woke up, I'm like in the cabin when sleeping gas was released. And I'm waking up, I'm like, what? We're not the state of Hawaii? Who's flying the plane? Then after 100 years, the paint is coming off. Yeah, the red, white, and blue is chipping off. How do we do this? So I told people, hey, wake up. Shh, don't get excited. Sure enough, I wake somebody up, they start snapping. What? Probably go back to sleep. So I'm trying to wake up people slowly, yeah? Like, wake up, wake up. Not, wake up! No, wake up. And it ain't ethnic. Wake up. And that's what I'm doing. That's my kuleana, waking people up. Once you start waking up, you gotta do something, right? Gotta do something. So what was overthrown in 1893? Was it the government or the state? It was the government. That means the Hawaiian Kingdom still exists. That's what I realized back then. That's why I retired. So what I gotta do? I gotta kind of walk this talk now. It's like I gotta go back to 1893, step into those shoes, and then start walking forward. So we're gonna create a government. How's that? A government by necessity. See, during occupations, it's called governments in exile. It actually is for real. Yep. Nationals of countries flee the state that's being occupied to form a government in exile. They're not government officials, they're nationals of that state. But they have to create it under the laws of that particular state. They can't make it up. Now, if you notice, do I look, from this information, am I talking about the sovereignty movement? No. Sovereignty already secured in the state. See, the sovereignty movement, okay, is made up of entities that believe that Hawaii is a part of the United States, and they want to break away. That's why it's called an independence movement, meaning it's an aspiration. It's not a reality. What I'm looking at is, we're not part of the United States. Never were. Sovereignty is still in the state. The question is, how do you exercise it? How do you expose this travesty? I don't have guns, and there's no use for guns. It's just brain power. You got to get creative. The doctrine of necessity is what is used for governments in exile. But the reason why they create governments in exile, because they'll be attacked if they're in the occupied state. See, we have something different here. We woke up. We're not being attacked because everybody thinks we're crazy. Actually, it's a good couple. I say, yeah, we're connecting over. Yeah. Oh, you like all these other guys. Yeah, good. So what we did was we created an acting government by necessity. And it's actually a legal doctrine. Now, we used to use it in the Army. A private can become a lieutenant in time of war. But he's called the acting lieutenant by assuming the chain of command. He's not the real commissioned officer. And he still carries vicarious liability. And he holds that position until a properly commissioned officer comes, then he goes back down being a private. That's how it works. Necessity. And it is his duty to assume the chain of command in order to maintain the command structure. That's the point. We're going to do the same thing, just at the government level. We're going to go from the private straight to the general. Because everybody's not there. The officers are there. The laws are there. We're going to assume the chain of command. So the doctrine of necessity is actually legal doctrine. Because what we're going to do is, we're pretty much self-declared. Did you know that's treason? That's treason. But what protects you from that? Necessity. So we're going to be very careful walking this tight wire. Because if we do something wrong, and 10 years later, somebody wakes up to this information, did you know that there's no statute of limitation on treason, they can come after me. Yeah, that's how it works. It's a double-edged sword when you play with laws. But we got to do it. There's no other way. So what does the doctrine of necessity say? An imperative necessity must arise of the existence of exceptional circumstances not provided for in the Constitution for immediate action to be taken to protect or preserve some vital function of the state. It's actually coming from a court case from Great Britain. There must be no other course of action reasonably available. Actions taken must be reasonably necessary in the interest of peace, order, and good government. It must not impair the just rights of citizens under the Constitution, even when they don't know they have rights. And finally, it must not have the intention of consolidating power, because that's treason. That's what acting means. And that's what we're going to do. We're going to create an acting government. So, state sovereignty, still there, sovereign, acting government. What does the acting government do? The purpose is, number one, to expose the occupation. Expose it. It's tough. Got no effectiveness. Can't enforce the laws. Because if we did have effectiveness, we wouldn't be occupied. Right? Second, to ensure that the United States complies with the laws of occupation, which includes the Hague and Geneva Convention, compliance. And to provide for an effective transition of the de jure government or lawful government in accordance with international law. That's all. Real simple. But the problem's going to hit the fan. So I'm going around giving talks, people confusing me with a sovereignty movement. I keep saying I'm not, but they say I am, whatever. Still a good cover for me because, you know, ignorance is the evidence of the crime. Not the crime itself. So it's going to come to a head. Because there's going to, so I'm giving talks around. And on the island of Hawaii, I give this talk at Keanu, and I'm explaining about Hawaiian law, the history of the Hawaiian kingdom. The laws are obligatory, you got to follow the law. Some guy in the audience says, really, you got to follow the law? Well, that's what the law says. But I know if you follow it, you know, it might happen. But my job is I got to share this because I'm in the acting government. And I have vicarious liabilities, I got to be careful. But yeah, that's what the law says. So this guy, named Lance Larson, decides to follow the law on the Big Island, 1998. What he does is he goes back to the Hawaiian Civil Code and he realizes that there's no law on driver's license. Why would that be the case? Because there were no automobiles in 1893. No, that's true. So he wants to make a point. And I learned this all from the pleadings in the case. He goes to his Jeep Comanche, takes off his license plate, takes off his safety sticker, registration, everything. On the back of his truck, he puts a big placard restating Section 6 of the Hawaiian Civil Code, which says the laws are obligatory upon all persons, whether subjects of this kingdom or citizens or subjects of any foreign state, while within the limits of this kingdom. Put it on the back, and guess what? He went around and drove around Hilo to get a lot of tickets. Yeah, he did. That was his way of letting people know they got to follow the law. Well, no doubt he got a lot of tickets, choke tickets. He went to court. He was represented by an attorney named Ninia Parks. Ninia Parks is an interesting person. Ninia Parks also came to this conclusion on her own. She's an attorney. Guess what? She looks Howard, blonde hair, blue eye, raised in California, adopted. She wanted to find her biological parents. She found out they're from Hawaii and they're part Hawaiian. So she came to Hawaii and she started to find her family. Yeah, that's what normally happens with adopted children. Yeah? And she found her family and she realized she's Native Hawaiian. Blonde hair, blue eye, but she also realized the country, the Hawaiian kingdom. So she also realized that her great-grandfather was William Kinney. prosecutor of Lilipo Kalani in that kangaroo court. And she wanted to make amends. So she represented Hawaiian subjects in court. So she represented Lance Larson. She pulls me in to be an expert witness. I get qualified as an expert witness by Judge Sandra Schutte, KL District Court. I explained there's no treaty. Without a treaty, there's no laws on driver's license. Simple. The judge was caught. She went in the back, thought about it, came out maybe 2 hours later. Mr. Larson rise, he rose, says, I want to fine you $900. Are you going to pay it? He said, no, because you didn't show me the treaty. If I do, I'm going to commit treason against the Hawaiian Kingdom. How's that? Wow. She locked him up for 30 days, 7 days solitary confinement. That just created an international matter. Now her attorney is concerned because her client might get beat up in solitary confinement because this is outrageous. Traffic. So now she starts coming after the acting government for not protecting her client. You're supposed to protect my client. I said, yeah, you're right. We are responsible, but we're not liable because we're occupied. The United States is supposed to administer Hawaiian law under the laws of occupation. They haven't. They have not complied over 100 years. So she actually filed a case against the Hawaiian government, United States, and the United Nations in federal court in Honolulu, Judge Samuel King's court. United Nations was dismissed because they had diplomatic immunity. United States was going to move to dismiss. They got removed by the Ninian Parks, and she told us, you're still liable. I said, but this court here is just as illegal as the court that locked up your client. It's an American court. We need to go to a court or a tribunal that is international. And that's when she said, okay. I said, we're going to go to the Permanent Court of Arbitration in the Netherlands. This is 1999. Okay? And the Permanent Court of Arbitration was created in 1899. Okay? Basically, it provides arbitration services, mediation, and fact-finding. This court has been made famous by the recent South China Sea case. Yeah? China building islands in South China Sea. That was at the Permanent Court of Arbitration. So the Permanent Court of Arbitration is an intergovernmental organization that creates ad hoc tribunals, meaning their job is to create tribunals to resolve disputes. The dispute that we have with Lance Larson, he's alleging that we are allowing American laws to be imposed in Hawaii in violation of the treaty with the United States. Because the United States treaty with the Hawaiian Kingdom says only Hawaiian law applies. That was the allegation. So before they can create a tribunal, they first need to ensure that they have what is called institutional jurisdiction. Because not anybody can just go to the Permanent Court of Arbitration and have a dispute resolved. If two private people go up there, you can't get in. No, you can go to a local court or go through arbitration locally, but you can't go internationally. Because it has to be an international dispute. So the PCA has institutional jurisdiction for the following disputes between states. Okay? So here's an example. Republic of Ecuador versus the United States. Okay? Back in 2011, this is when they started a case for the violation of this treaty, the U.S.-Ecuadorian treaty. You notice here, name of claimants, the Republic of Ecuador, state. The United States of America, state. That's an interstate arbitration. Okay? Then you have between a state and an international organization. In this case, this is the municipality of Peru versus United Nations. So if you notice under claimant, which is like the plaintiff, respondent is defendant, the claimant, state, the UN, international organization. Then they create the tribunal. They can also create a tribunal to address a dispute between a state and a private party. Here's our case. Larson versus Hawaiian Kingdom. Private entity, Hawaiian Kingdom, a state. They verified Hawaii to be a state. Just like how I presented this history to you, self-evident, right? They had to see the same thing. So they actually verified Hawaii to be an independent state, still existing. Because you gotta be a state, in fact, in order to have a dispute, right? Now when the case was first filed in 1999, November, for 5 months, the Permanent Court of Arbitration is vetting this process. And I get a call in February of 2000 by the Secretary General. We're the defendants. We're the defendants. He calls me, 11-hour difference too. And he says, Mr. Sai, as the agent for the Hawaiian Kingdom, because there's me, representative the respondent, that's me. I'm the agent, okay? So he says, as the agent for the Hawaiian Kingdom, he's telling me that the court, the Permanent Court of Arbitration, cannot find any evidence that the Hawaiian Kingdom ceases to exist. Because all he finds is American laws passed in Congress, which is limited to U.S. territory, which is the basis of the dispute. Lance Paul Larson, a Hawaiian subject, alleges that the government of the Hawaiian Kingdom is allowing the unlawful imposition of American municipal laws over the claimant's person within the jurisdiction of the Hawaiian Kingdom. That's the whole case. American laws. So he tells me, he says, and we also verified that the treaty between Hawaii and Netherlands is still in existence, because the Permanent Court of Arbitration is in the Netherlands. So he says to me, in order to maintain the integrity of this case, because this is nuclear. In order to maintain the integrity of this case, he said, I highly recommend that the Hawaiian government, with the consent of Nenia Parks, Lance Larson's attorney, okay, Nenia Parks, travel to Washington, D.C. and provide a formal invitation to the United States to join in the arbitration. That's what he said. And I went, yeah, that's a good idea. Now, providing an invitation to join in the arbitration will elicit one of three responses. Number one, they're not going to respond, but they're going to call upon the Permanent Court of Arbitration to cease and desist because Hawaii is a part of the United States. And if they do that, then the Hawaiian government say, then we'll make an arbitration agreement with you to try to prove it. So step in and prove it. Second, they will deny the invitation, yeah, and let the proceedings go. Or third, they accept the invitation and try to explain how American laws can be applied in Hawaii over Lance Larson. Well, they actually went and said, so I got a call 1 week later, because we had a meeting in March 3rd in Washington, D.C. with the State Department. 1 week later, we get a call from the court. The Deputy Secretary General, Phyllis Hamilton, says that they just received word from the American Embassy in The Hague that they have no intention of joining the invitation, accepting the invitation, but could they have permission from the Hawaiian government and Lance Larson to have access to the pleadings and records. Number one, they did not dispute the existence of the Hawaiian Kingdom as a state. Second, they asked permission from the Hawaiian government to have access to the records. I said, sure. Then she called Nenia Parks to ask of her the permission. That was March of 2000. The very next month, April, the tribunal was created. 3 judges. Now you notice, they've already verified the Hawaiian Kingdom's existence. And it's not an argument. And just like how you folks saw this, how do you argue with this? You can't. It is. It's self-evident. Just falsify it. You can't. That's what these guys were put that position in. So the tribunal was set up. And we were told to submit pleadings by May, then counter pleadings in June, and then in July, a procedural order came up from the court. And basically they said that out of the pleadings, the plaintiff is asking the tribunal to make a decision that the United States is in violation of Lance Larson's rights. And once they make that decision, then they move to the second phase to determine whether or not the Hawaiian government is liable for the violation of those rights. So it's like a tort. It's a tort issue. Because we didn't violate Lance Larson's rights. It was the United States did it, right? But he's holding us accountable, which he has every right to, but we just got to make sure we can defend ourselves. Now this developed what is called the indispensable third-party rule. So we were told that there's going to be an oral hearing set in December of 2000. And we have to, well, Lance Larson has to address on whether or not the court can proceed to determine the United States violated his rights without the United States president. without violating the indispensable third-party rule. Indispensable third-party rule is this party is indispensable to the proceedings. The problem is the U.S. is not part of the proceedings. So there are two cases on this. Monetary gold, that was at the International Court of Justice, 1953, where the indispensable third party was Albania. This was an issue between Italy versus United States, France, and Great Britain. The second indispensable third party precedent in international relations is East Timor, 1990s. Portugal versus Australia, indispensable third party, Indonesia. Okay. India Parks had to provide an argument, how can they proceed without the United States present, based upon these precedent cases. So that was the case. So that's me up there with the beard, trying to look distinguished. This is the Permanent Court of Arbitration under this steeple. This is the International Court of Justice. These are two arbitrators. Okay, and this is our acting Attorney General, Gary Dubin. Now, did you know that two of the judges that were on this tribunal are now judges on the International Court of Justice selected by the United Nations? Kind of gives you an idea of the caliber of the people that are on this tribunal, right? They won't step into something that's frivolous. Yeah, that's why you notice the Secretary General said to maintain the integrity of this case, because we're very procedural. Gotta be. Well, here is a short clip of the arguments, and I'm going to give you a prelude on this, about 2 minutes, a 3-minute video. You're going to see me taking advantage of this situation. We're on the world stage. I'm going to present Hawaii's history, even though we're the defendants defending ourselves. We're going to make a political move. We're going to show everybody. Yeah? And then you're going to see a statement made by the lead arbitrator, who is now a judge on the International Court of Justice. I'm going to prep you with this. He's going to say, thus the issue in rem. You can hear the word in rem. In rem is Latin, which means it is. It affects everybody. As opposed to in personam. It is in the opinion of a person. Because he's saying the existence of the Hawaiian Kingdom is in rem. It is not in personam. It doesn't exist in the mind of Mr. Larson. You're going to see that. And what you're also going to see is procedurally, they already verified Hawaii to be an independent state. That's why we're having the hearing. This is the dispute. But you're going to see me, I'm going to try to get around the indispensable third-party rule. I'm going to basically try to get something from the arbitrators that I need. But I got to be careful because I'm a defendant. Yeah? So you're going to see me say, what we need from this tribunal, from an institutional jurisdictional standpoint, to verify Hawaii as an independent state. That's why we're here. But I need this tribunal to look at what was Hawaii before the occupation. I need you to verify Hawaii as an independent state. Because it has to come out of the tribunal. I need that. So you're going to see me, what we need from this tribunal is what came before the occupation. Before. That way we don't violate the indispensable third-party rule, because I'm going to get something out of this. So here we go. Watch me tap dance. Dominion of the Hawaiian Kingdom. In summary, from 1840, the Hawaiian Kingdom possessed a constitutional government with elected and appointed officials and a complete system of civil and criminal laws to govern Hawaiian territory. On April 8, 1842, King Commander III and Privy Council commissions 3 envoys to secure international recognition of Hawaiian independence. And these individuals are Timoteo Ha'alilio, William Richards, and Sir George Simpson. On December 19, 1842, Hawaiian envoys secured United States President Tyler's recognition of Hawaiian independence. November 28, 1843, the British government and the French government formally entered into a declaration recognizing Hawaiian independence. In our pleadings, we refer to that as the 1843 Anglo-Franco Proclamation. From that point, Hawaii has had its statehood recognized as being independent. As such, it began to enter into these treaties. Austria-Hungary, Denmark, France, Germany, Great Britain, Italy, Japan, Netherlands, Russia, Spain, and the United States of America. International recognition is evidenced
that the Hawaiian Kingdom had diplomatic representatives as of 1893 from those countries, as far as consulates and embassies. Rather, what we find is that the United States has never expressed itself as an occupier. Who would? It will never admit to occupation. But yet, to admit to occupation is in a sense to admit to the continued existence of the Hawaiian Kingdom as an independent state, which is really the crux of the matter, which is actually what is holding up, you might say, this issue to be resolved. Thus, the legal order, thus the reestablishment of the government, thus the relationship between its nationals.
I mean, to be slightly unkind, but thus the issue in rem. The point is that if the Hawaiian Kingdom continues to exist, its existence is in rem. It's not in personam, and the Hawaiian existence, the Hawaiian Kingdom doesn't exist solely in the opinion of Mr. Larson.
Right. But that existence should not be dependent upon an occupier, because you basically put the occupier on an equal footing with the Hawaiian Kingdom in its own territory. So really what needs to be addressed is what came before the occupation, whether the statehood or whether the legality or illegality of the Hawaiian Kingdom, not the illegality or legality of the United States as an occupier. Should the tribunal find it has jurisdiction, we are prepared to submit and offer a proof. We felt that this tribunal would offer some clarity so that for the first time we have a third party to present these type of merits that can be scrutinized by international law, rather than taking it before a United States tribunal, which could not rule on it to the detriment of itself. So in that sense, there is really no other way to address this issue, and the opportunity did arise because it was Mr. Larson who was adhering to Hawaiian Kingdom law. And if the United States was adhering to occupation, not whether they're illegal or illegal, but if they were adhering to the laws of occupation, we wouldn't be here right now.
So you can see where you can go with this information, but you gotta know what you're saying. You gotta know the terminology. And this was an engagement, and things were coming out of this. It's pretty heavy. I still kind of look back like, wow, I was actually there. But you notice I was saying, what came before the occupation? I needed that because I can use that, because once an international court says Hawaii was an independent state, I can say we still are. That's why we're in the court. We have this dispute. Well, the arbitration award came out. And in that arbitration award, paragraph 7.4, it says a perusal of the material discloses that in the 19th century, the Hawaiian Kingdom existed as an independent state, recognized as such by the United States, the United Kingdom, and various other states. That's big. Because by the court saying the United States recognized the independence, that is saying that the United States recognizes only Hawaiian law applies in Hawaiian territory, not American law. So does the British, and so do the various other states who had treaties. That's important. So you have to know how to play this game, right? This is like a game of chess. One move will lead to another move. Okay, it's not checkers, it's chess, a lot of strategy. Then it also addresses the issue of whether or not Lance Larson and the indispensable third party, did he succeed through argument? So it says, paragraph 12.15, it follows that the tribunal cannot determine whether the respondent, called the Hawaiian Kingdom, has failed to discharge its obligations toward the claimant without ruling on the legality of the acts of the United States of America. Remember, because they arrested him. Yet this is precisely what the monetary gold principle precludes the tribunal from doing. That's the precedent case. As the International Court explained in East Timor, the second case, the court could not rule on the lawfulness of the conduct of a state when its judgment would imply an evaluation of the lawfulness of the conduct of another state, which is not a party. The Hawaiian Kingdom, they're looking at the conduct of the Hawaiian Kingdom as a state. And that's why they say they can't move forward. The United States is an indispensable third party. Now remember, we're the defendants in the case. We're not the plaintiff. So Lance Larson could not sue the acting government without the United States participating. This is not Keanu's case. We're the defendant. We just utilized this case to showcase our country. We weren't trying to help Lance Larson sue us. No. So the case then they said, but to possibly get around the indispensable third-party rule set up by the Monetary Code in East Timor, fact-finding. At one stage of the proceedings, the question was raised whether some of the issues which the parties wish to present might not be dealt with by way of fact-finding. In addition to its role as a facilitator of arbitration and conciliation, the Permanent Court of Arbitration has various procedures for fact-finding, both as between states and otherwise, called a state and a private party. But we never followed through, because who's going to pay for it? Did you know that the case right now, because Lance Larson was coming after us, he was the one who was responsible for the costs, right? He's a plaintiff. Did you know the total cost for this was about $150,000 that he had to come up with on his own, not us. But monies came in. An account was opened in the court. Money came in. I found out it came in from missionary families, making amends. But anonymous, you don't know who they are. It didn't come out of my pocket. But that shows you what happens, yeah, when it's legit. Now, fact-finding, okay, now that's mutual. That means we're going to bear some of the costs. And we say, you know what, nah, not yet. Now, what happened after the hearing, on the last day of the hearing, we got a call in the Netherlands, in The Hague, by an ambassador from Rwanda, who had received all the information, went to the court, Permanent Court of Arbitration, and retrieved all the information, the pleadings. Called us and said he needs to meet with us, the acting government, in Brussels, Belgium. That's where the Rwandan embassy is. Caught the train to Brussels, picked up by a motorcade, taken to a meeting of the African Union where the ambassador was. Greeted him, he excused himself from the meeting, took us across the street to this little cafe across the street. It was closed down for 2 hours. We found out that Rwanda had bought it out. So nobody's in the cafe. He knocks on the door, manager opens it, greets him, lets us in, closes the door, locks it, shades down, lights on, coffee ready. And I documented this event in one of my larger articles out of San Francisco School of Law. So it's actually been vetted. I'm not making it up. But you can make a movie on it called The Matrix. It's called The Real Matrix. So the ambassador, I'm sitting across from the ambassador, my legal team is behind me, and he says his government has reviewed everything and it's clear always occupied. And this cannot be tolerated. He said Rwanda understands when international law is violated, but the international community does not step in until it's too late. He's talking about genocide, mass murder. The Tutsis and the Hutus. He's a Tutsi survivor. 800,000 people massacred in Rwanda. If you ever saw that movie Hotel Rwanda? That's that. So this ambassador is a Tutsi survivor. The Hutus were coming after the Tutsis. So he said that his government, his president has authorized the Minister of Foreign Affairs to him that Rwanda is prepared to report to the United Nations General Assembly the prolonged occupation of Hawaii, put it on the agenda in order to bring it to an end. This is December of 2000, 16 years ago. And I'm looking at the ambassador, I'm like, whoa. But see, that's what happens when you're in this field. I mean, people take it to the next level. And I said, excuse me, Your Excellency, I need to talk to my legal team. So we talked. Sat back down, I said, please convey to your president our sincere gratitude. But we cannot accept this offer at this time. Our people back home have no clue of our profound status. We have to go back home and address the denationalization. We got to begin re-education. So he thanked me. He said, no, thank you. Might call you later. I didn't say that. I said, thank you. Meeting came to an end. It was decided that since I already had my bachelor's degree in sociology from the University of Hawaii in 1987, I'm going to go back for my master's degree in political science, and I'm going to go toe-to-toe with professors that are teaching the wrong history. I have an agenda now. I'm going to set things straight. And I was not well-liked going into the University of Hawaii. Kaleko. Kaleko saw that. It's like I walked into the fire den. Yeah, but I had an asbestos suit on, so I was okay. And I just started to address it. So I figured, don't argue. You know how I change minds? Doing research paper. Make sure I get the right footnotes, the right theoretical framework, the methodology. Yeah? Let that speak for it. So, got my master's degree, 2004, got my PhD degree, 2008. Now I teach, now I sit on doctoral committees, and now I'm here sharing with you this history, because it's for real. And it's already been vetted. But I had the upper hand, I had the ace in the pocket, because I already went to the A before I got my PhD. But if anything, what the PhD did for political science and the master's degree, it refined my skills. Now I can articulate it much better. So when I travel to Italy, I can speak to law professors, straight up, they got it. All I gotta do is explain the facts, not the theory, because they understand the theory. And it's there, and things start to move. It's moving. Yeah. We just gotta keep up with it. So, as we're educating people, things are now moving ahead at the international level. And by the way, did you know that there's a lot of things happening that I don't say? Do you think I'm just educating people? No, education, sometimes you gotta do stuff. But I'm a firm believer of, I don't tell people I'm going fishing, otherwise the fish could eat and swim away. I say I'm going holo holo. I'm not going fishing. When I come back with the poke, then you know I went fishing. What kind of fish I got and where I got them from. And then I share, yeah, eat. Oh, I know what you know it is. You don't have to make poke, on or sashimi or poke with ahi. Oh, you get ono, you got nenue, or even get popio you can make, depending what you ono for. Yeah? So when I travel outside, I do a lot of things, and I'm very careful of not to share, not to tip my hat. Yeah? Because you know when you come after this, back in the 90s, when people don't like what you say, or they come after you hard. You go look me up, Google. Got arrested for racketeering, money laundering, tax evasion, and theft. Yeah, because I was talking about land titles no good in Hawaii because of notaries. Title companies attacked, state of Hawaii attacked. Oh yeah. That's why me, I don't wear my ring. Nobody knows I'm married. I've been married 27 years. Once they attacked, oh, okay, now I put on my military hat, okay? Lay low. You're not gonna know who my family is. My son was 8 years old, my youngest one was 4 years old. You're not gonna know who they are. Then they picked me as an activist. Good. Take the focus away from my family. And then I went in the university system. I'm not an activist. I'm the most conservative guy you don't meet. I'm serious. I follow rules. No, I am. I'm so conservative, I'm radical. How's that oxymoron? What is conservative? This is a remote control. Yeah? What's radical? You think it's a hat. Still a remote control. Education, we're dealing with brainwashing. And it's okay to be upset. It's okay to be afraid. But if you start getting fearful, get more water. Fill the gourd. Yeah? Fill the gourd. So, how's this? 2016, South China Sea case. Anybody heard? Who did not hear the South China Sea? South China Sea is about China building islands in the middle of the South China Sea, trying to claim an exclusive economic zone of 200-mile radius off of each one, thus claiming pretty much the majority of the South China Sea, because $5 trillion of trade goes through that. Yeah. United States Navy sending ships out there, pushing the envelope with China. That could have been a flashpoint for World War III. Naval ships coming out of Pearl Harbor. Hawaii getting drawn into this problem. Did you know Hawaii's targeted for nuclear strike by China and Russia, as well as Korea, North Korea? Oh yeah, yeah. This is not a game. And they're not targeting our beaches. Hawaii's headquarters for the Pacific Command. That's the reality check. Yeah. I don't like that. This military occupation got to end because we are in harm's way, whether we like it or not. And that guy in North Korea is a bit unstable. And I don't know who that other guy's going to come in the United States is a bit unstable too. But I don't want to be in the middle of that. So South China Sea, the case came up. Philippines versus China. Came up with an award. The indispensable third party came up. Yeah. Whether or not a decision made that would be binding between the Philippines and China, would that decision affect a party that could be considered indispensable like Vietnam, Malaysia, Indonesia, Brunei? There were the other countries that bordered the South China Sea. That's what you have to see. So they came on and said, well, they made good arguments. The Philippines made good arguments. And here's the decision. The present situation is different from the few cases in which an international court or tribunal has declined to proceed due to the absence of an indispensable third party, namely in monetary gold and East Timor before the International Court of Justice, and Larson versus Hawaii Kingdom. Wow. That means they recognize the validity of the case, its integrity. This was not made up, contrary to what people have been saying who don't understand the system. We are now the third precedent case of an indispensable third party. That's pretty cool, yo. Yeah, and I was the lead agent in that case, so I know the case very well. And that's why I get to go to Italy, get to explain it to the law school. Yeah. Now, the Permanent Court of Arbitration, you got fact-finding. Did you know just a few months ago, Larson and the Hawaiian Kingdom entered into an agreement for fact-finding? We've initiated the process. Permanent Court of Arbitration acknowledged the receipt of the documents and US $10,000 deposit. Request is currently before the Secretary General of the Permanent Court of Arbitration for consideration, because we're asking him to be the appointing authority to select the 3 commissioners for fact-finding. International Commission of Inquiry will be comprised of 3 commissioners appointed by the Permanent Court of Arbitration. The commission, according to the agreement, will determine first what is the function and role of the government of the Hawaiian Kingdom in accordance with the basic norm and framework of international humanitarian law, meaning occupation. And also including by the mere fact that we're brainwashed, nobody knows anything, blah, 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 blah. Once you finish that, then we get into the second, what are the duties and obligations of the government toward Lance Larson, and by extension toward all Hawaiian subjects residing in Hawaii and abroad. The case is going on. Yeah, things are happening, right? And Italy, the law school, they picked up on this. And they're now seeing their place in this because of the Hawaiian-Italian treaty. And what is the obligation that those treaties have to the Italians that have come through Hawaii where war crimes have been committed against them? All of a sudden, this is out of our hands. Countries are now taking it on their own because they can't deny it. Can you see how big this is? Takes it beyond the culture, takes it beyond the race. This is international law. And the ones who committed the crimes are dead. Don't step into their shoes today. Just back off. Let the process go. Get educated. That's the key. Don't step into something that you don't know what you're stepping in. Because when you talk about the law, it's double-edged. Be careful. It's double-edged. It cuts. Make sure you carry the sword by the handle, not the blade. So if you have any want further information, you can visit this blog. That's pretty good, you know. A lot of good information up there. A lot of the law schools are looking at it in poli-sci departments. In Europe, see, in Hawaii, they still think we're indigenous. And they're talking about colonization. Isn't that crazy? In light of this information, you gotta flip, because you're going down a path of no return. But you also could be going down a path of being an accomplice to denationalization and brainwashing. Because if you now know, now they can be used against you. That's what a crime is. So that's why a lot of Hawaiians got big traps over you. You know the traps? Hey, Hawaiian, what? I don't know. Well, keep saying I don't know. Because you're protected. I don't know. Get educated. Mahalo. Thank you very much. You guys want any questions answered? Any questions? Yes. No, so if you guys gotta go, please, Helen, no problem. I'm sorry I went over the time, but it's a lot of information. Question?